this. And actually, I'm going to share my screen here so that everybody can all, you guys, can you all see the Word document? I'll move this over here.
Yes.
All right. So, okay. Wait, can you still, it just switched, didn't it?
It switched
Yeah.
your email.
All right, let's move that back over there. I thought I was going to look at the camera, but I guess not. Okay. Just real quickly. So we did the leave policy, obviously, at the last meeting. There is a section where that'll go kind of later on in this document. But what I was hoping through that we to talk about today here is some of the operational stuff, kind of roll up our sleeves and get into some of the meat and the potatoes of this here today and get through this in the next hour. We'll see how far we get anyway. So just kind of, again, to review, we did the leave policy at the last meeting. That'll come place later on. Just starting here with the beginning of the document, the stuff in blue is kind of the stuff that we've talked about at the last meeting, the last meetings, pertains to the taxing jurisdiction. And I'm gonna just quickly scroll down through here. Kathy, on page 5 of this document, you and I still got to get together in terms of this one section and how this is enacted, but we'll get to that. There's still plenty of other stuff to work on here. And then this next section, what I'd like to get in here to today is the concept of operations. Can everybody see this okay? For some reason, I cannot see what's showing on the screen. Let's see here. Just gonna make a quick adjustment. Bear with me just a quick second. We really are batting a thousand with technology today. Okay. All right.
Doug, you might want to turn off your notifications. Just we're seeing your email pop up. It's okay by me, but you might not want us to see it.
Yeah. There's any zillion of things that popping up. Okay. Can you do a single page? Is that? That's probably not going to help, is it? Let me just kind of get the concept of operations. Okay. So jumping right into this section, concept of operations. So the very first thing here, wanted to have a conversation, see what everybody thought. So we've certainly learned some items this year as we've dealt with some of this stuff and how we go about a variety of different things. The thing that's a little bit unique for us is we have a elected, I don't know if anybody from the town clerk's office is with us. I don't think so. We have an elected town clerk who basically has the ability to manage her office. We've got an elected highway superintendent who obviously is running the highway department, and then all of the other operations that we deal with and are all administrative appointments by the town board, and ultimately the town board is responsible. So very first thing here, jumping right into this concept of operations, we need to figure out how we're going to spell out who's responsible for implementing this plan. And it might be a series of people, and then we'll have to talk about kind of the scope of work and those types of things. But, you know, going back to kind of what we did this year, we were working collaboratively, obviously, and we're going to talk about that in a second. We've got to include that in this plan. But who is the person? It's my guess is it's probably, and I'll just throw this out there for discussion, it's probably the highway superintendent for the highway, it's probably the town clerk for the town clerk, and it's probably the town manager for the rest of the operations. And what's your thoughts?
Yes.
I think yes, but I think you might put town manager or town supervisor in the rest of the town one, just in terms of should we ever be in a situation where we're between town managers, or to not have to redo it. What do you guys think of that?
I think that makes sense doing it that way.
Does it have to be just one, or can it be, you know, town supervisor / town manager? Because we did go without a town supervisor for, you know, a number of months a few years ago.
Right, that's why I feel like we need both.
If we do or, then it could be one or the other. Right, and if, rather than and, when it would be both in conjunction, so manager or supervisor?
I think or, yeah, it's better.
Right.
Because
I
would
agree
it
with
be a safeguard if you were saying it was, it happened January 1st? So now you're being, and there's a new highway superintendent coming in who would have no idea what this is. So you'd almost have to have a safeguard for somebody else.
All right. You guys are all absolutely right. Let me work on wordsmithing that outside of the time right now, but I understand kind of what we're talking about. The point person or somebody else who could step in, maybe a highway superintendent or deputy highway superintendent or whatever. We'll have to kind of wordsmith that and figure that out, but let me get something for you on that.
Maybe it's the town manager and then it's the three top people. And so that, I mean, I feel like unfortunately, Doug, you would end up being the backup for any gap because unless you think it would be like a deputy clerk or somebody from the highway department stepping into the role, I feel like the umbrella safety net is the town manager.
Yeah, so the highway, highway specifically, highway superintendent and deputy highway superintendent would definitely have a lot more in terms of the need for the day-to-day operations of the highway department. In
Right.
the scenario that we just talked about, let's pretend for a second there's a brand new highway superintendent. The highway superintendent gets to appoint the deputy. So the highway superintendent, if there's a crisis on January 1st or January 2nd, the highway superintendent may or may not have appointed the deputy at that point. And then you could run into a problem scenario with that situation, especially if the organizational meeting hasn't been held yet. So I know that's planning for the extreme, but that's kind of the whole point of this exercise, right? And to have these
Yeah.
conversations and everything. So
Wouldn't the same apply to the town clerk?
Yeah,
it
I
would-
agree, Gary.
it would. Although there's traditionally town clerks, your deputy clerks are certainly appointed. There's also a social service provision. There's more likelihood that you'll have some consistency between town clerks if there's a switch in the elected position. But Kathy, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, and I've just been thinking here, you could probably smell the wood burning from there, but my concern is not a concern at this time. But if your town manager and the highway supervisor are all not in agreement, and one's saying to do it, and one's not saying to not do it, perhaps one person should initially make the call. And if that person's not available, then, so instead of just simply saying or, you know, that it would be the town manager. If the town manager is not available or whatever wording you want to use, then town supervisor or vice versa. But I feel like in this, I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm concerned about a situation where parties can't agree. Who would, I
Yeah,
mean, in which case it could go to the town board. I think the town board ultimately has to have some control over this too. We don't want endless executive orders coming out of this. So as a checks and balances kind of a situation, which you may have somewhere, or how
Yeah.
long this will last without, the town board would at some point have to, oh, here it is. Well, no, that's something different.
Yeah, there is, we had talked about that earlier. I do think that needs to be written into this, that at some point in time, that this is only good for a certain time period, and then the town board has to take action. And that's even like the resolution giving that we always do at the organizational meeting chair relating to the town manager. It's decision ability in between meetings, but obviously always taking
Right.
stuff back to the town board for the next.
Right, and maybe it should just be at the next town board shall be approved or whatever. Like you said, this is planning for things. Well, we never thought this would have been the situation a year ago for us, but you have a situation where, the manager's saying, we're gonna go to this, and the supervisor says, we're not gonna do it. We need, in my opinion, someone to be able to make the final.
Let's keep, and again, kind of the rest of the sentence, obviously it's town of Canandaigua. the activation of the plan as described in the scope of the work up above here. And this is Kathy, we're gonna have to work on this together a little bit on this section here, but we'll spell that out here. Okay, kind of this next section. Upon determination of implementing this plan, all employees and contractors, obviously the town of Canandaigua, shall be notified by, how are we gonna notify? So, right, we have certainly learned a lot. I'm suggesting the word electronic communication just as a point for discussion. I don't know what the correct wording is there, but obviously this year we use text messages. We use updates on the website. We've used MailChimp. We've put out press releases. We try to do it all. We've used Facebook. You know, there may or not may be other types of communication that we need to communicate with our residents, the employees, and everyone else. Actually, the residents come in a second. This is employees and contractors. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, suggestions in terms of that?
Well, it's a method we used and it was very effective, so I would leave it at that. You certainly can't use snail mail or, you know, personal contact. Electronic communication kind of covers it, I would think.
Kathy just crashed off. She sent me a text message. She'll be back in a second. Yeah. Let me just kind of keep going here for a second because this paragraph all ties together. With details provided as possible necessary with additional information, updates provided on a regular basis. I put this in here, and again, this is for point of conversation. Town board members will be updated through electronic communications no less than once per week while the plan is activated. Now, we could say once per day, we could say once per hour. You guys would drive me nuts. You pretty much do all the time anyway, with text messages back and forth, but we need to have the town board members updated whenever this plan is activated, obviously. Any thoughts on that? Is that reasonable? At least no less than once per week? Or do you want it more often than that? I mean, we were doing daily, honestly, during the height of all this when this first started. And some days I didn't have a lot of information to share with you, but.
I think the once per week, no less than, is the important part. And then, you know, as more as needed.
Right.
That's fine.
I think as long as you have no less than once per week, that gives you or whoever the leeway to do it more often, but at the minimum, it's once a week.
Now, I put in here again, electronic communication, and we may need to define electronic communication, but what's everybody's thought? You know, obviously this year we relied very heavily on text messages as well as emails. I would say were the primary means of communication with the town board. I'm sorry,
I would put those two on there and just be done with it. Electronic communications, including text and email.
So here's the thing. Normally, the text messaging wouldn't really be an option. We have that as an option right now because of the governor's executive order. And then I have to periodically print those out. And Gene, I've been making a stack of all that stuff. But anyway, those are all foilable. So technically, the email is a way. Kate and I were actually talking about a different phone system yesterday with our managers meeting that may have some other ways of recording that type of stuff. So that's why, again, I kind of go back to this word, just kind of talking this out loud with you, electronic communication, which may include text or email as permitted by the regulatory reporting requirements or something.
Well, is email permitted today?
Yes.
So then just say email and text if permitted by law or whatever. I don't remember how he made it okay.
Okay. All right.
People are okay with the information on their phones being foilable?
Say it again, Gene. I didn't hear you.
I said, are people okay with, if they're using their personal cell phones for town work, are they okay with that being foilable?
Well, yes, because Doug just explained that he's been printing them out so that the foil is actually going to be from that. He's going to be providing the printouts so that it's not necessary for somebody to have their whole phone foiled. We can use the paper
Could
copy.
happen. I just want to let you know that that could happen.
Yeah.
Electronic communication methods will notify the general public of the current status and events not less than once per month while the plan is activated. Now, obviously, we were doing once per week. Again, at the height of this earlier, you know, we may have to get back to that. We were just having a conversation again about that, maybe at least every other week. But I put in at a minimum, at least once per month, we're putting something out. We do the newsletter anyway. So at least if there's a basis that, you know, that the public would be notified. Constituency groups will be notified of operational changes through electronic communication such as Facebook, newsletter, MailChimp, other means available. Other
What's the
interesting,
constituency group?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What would be a constituency group?
It could be somebody, I mean, generally constituents are obviously residents or taxpayers of the town of Canandaigua.
So I would think people in the water district, people in the drainage district, you know what I mean, where it might not be the entire town. So you would have a separate constituency group is how I read that.
Okay.
And then other interested parties, vendors will be notified by phone or email as necessary, maintain communications with public and constituents, yada, yada, there, the rest of that. Again, that sentence all kind of goes together there, but generally speaking, we've been able to achieve that through the newsletters and the different things that we've been doing. This next section is still part of this operational section here. The blank, Town of Canandaigua, their designees will maintain awareness of information, direction, guidance from public health officials, the governor's office directing the implementation of the changes as necessary. And then upon resolution of the public health emergency, the blank, the Town of Canandaigua will direct the resumption of normal operations or operations, it says, with modifications as necessary. So again, that I think ties into the first conversation that we had. And I'll wordsmith that piece of it as we kind of get in there. In terms of the concept, any comments on this? And then we get into the meat and the potatoes here. All right, so I'm going to jump down here to mission essential functions. So when the plan is activated, obviously the town of Canandaigua is committed to ensuring essential functions will be continued even under the most challenging circumstances. Maintain the safety of employees, contractors, vital services required by law. This is all pretty self-explanatory. So I'm just going to jump right down here to mission essential functions. So here's where we need to list in the plan our mission essential function, the description, and then give it a priority rating. So Caitlin had given me some stuff for highway, water, and the transfer station. You know, the other components, obviously, we've got code enforcement, parks, development, planning, the town clerk's office, town manager's office. Town board has to be able to meet, planning board, zoning board, ECB, board of assessment review. Everybody still has to be able to function, even if on a modified basis during this emergency type of situation. And obviously the template here actually that comes from the group that sent this out included information technology as the first one, which that's obviously one of the things that we've learned this year is the critical importance of information technology. Providing all hardware, software for the town, maintains the town's network and phone system. The highway department, obviously, we need to be able to make sure the roads are safe, the vehicles are still functioning, the equipment is still operated. You know, that's probably, so priority level 1 is the highest level. 4 is essential, but it's not the first and foremost priority. So obviously roads, water, or I would 100% say we got to have roads and water. And then providing for the collection of transportation of household waste. I mean, the operation of the transfer station, think back to April, and it was a zoo. The people that were trying to use the transfer station and how important that was as everybody was cleaning out their house and everything that we were dealing with. Is it a 1? It's a question, I guess, I have for you. It probably is a 1, I would think. But what's everybody's What's everybody's thoughts?
I would agree that it's a
I
one.
would think so too.
Yeah.
Definitely pretty high up there. Is it as important as the roads and the water? You could argue it's slightly less, but it depends. How many numbers are we going to have here?
4.
This is a vital operation. Think about if we didn't have it for a month or 6 weeks. I'd put it right up there with roads and water.
Yeah, we'd absolutely be overwhelmed at the end of that 4 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, and just think about health and safety and everything
Yeah.
else for all of that.
Continuing that operation during any problem like this would be essential, I think.
Right. Okay. So let's leave that a 1. So then jumping down, and I can fill in the descriptions later, but think about code enforcement. You know, back again, what we learned earlier this year is I actually had the code enforcement officers taking their vehicles home, responding directly from their homes. But they still had to do inspections. There were still things. And oh, by the way, the governor's executive orders require the code enforcement to be one of the enforcement mechanisms. So, you know, what's people's thoughts kind of, I guess, on a rating? If you guys could help me out with this 1, 2, 3, or 4, maybe code enforcement's not a 1, maybe it's a 2, maybe it's a 3. But it's
I think
probably pretty high.
It depends on which context we're talking. I mean, looking at footers is one thing, but going out and enforcing any rules that might come down from on high, that would be a 1. So, you know, it depends on how you look at it. I think probably in this context, it probably ought to be a 1.
Doug, in the next section, can you define different aspects of a department as a 1 or a 2? I think like you could define as enforcement of any executive orders as a 1 and, you know, building inspections as a 2. I think the next section breaks it down in more detail.
It does. We can get into that. Now, keep in mind, we also just with our policy, we just said all of our positions are essential. So we'll just take the whole list of all of our essential positions, populate them in there with kind of the description of the essential responsibilities, and then we can details as Caitlin was saying. So parks, just jumping here to parks. Obviously, it's important. It's essential. It may not be a 1, but you know, the parks, we saw a real need for parks for people to be able to get out of their homes and be able to get outside and get some fresh air. Anybody have any thoughts or comments?
It doesn't feel like a 1 to me.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
I guess
I think it depends on the time of year. I mean, wintertime, no. Summertime, I think it's more of a higher priority.
And it's not a road, it's not water, it's not trash. It's certainly important. I mean, we love our parks and we think they're really important, but I feel like what we're trying to do is say what's more important than other things, and I just can't feel like the parks are there.
What do you think?
if we're in an extreme situation, I would say you know, it's a nice thing to have available, but I would almost see it as a 3, just because if we're in dire straits, we have these things we have to function and survive, these things that are going to be extra and nice.
Right.
So I see it as down a little bit, down as that 3, just in my gut.
Everybody
I could be wrong.
I was thinking at 3 or 4 myself, honestly. Is everybody good with that? 3? All right.
great.
Yep. All right.
Fine.
Development and planning. So this would be taking applications, new applications coming in, assisting with, you know, our general development office. Code enforcement, remember, I left that separate. So code enforcement would be separate. This would be more of the planning function.
In a state of emergency, I think that's like parks.
Agreed. I do think it's not a 1 or a 2. I'll throw out there, I'm kind of thinking maybe a 4, to be honest with you. Because, you know, again, we just saw, it's not to say it's not important. It's certainly essential, but on the priority list, what are we going to get up and running first?
Yeah.
So you're thinking we get the parks running before we got the development office running
Basically.
all right.
Town clerk's office. So let's face it, a lot of the money comes in through the town clerk's office, all those building permits and everything, plus also the clerk's office is handling the reservations for the parks for us. Again, the ability for somebody to use a road or somebody to turn on their tap water at home and for water to come out, that's a higher priority to me, no offense, Gene, than the town clerk's office being open, but the town clerk's office is essential for sure.
It feels like for certain things, they're a 2.
Mhm.
And for some of the other things, they're the same, like, you
Yeah.
know, you mentioned reservations. That's a 4, you know, it's like, but I feel like there's definitely an element of it that's a 2.
The town clerk's office also handles vital statistics, which
Mhm.
are time sensitive and are necessary. I mean, if there's a pandemic and people are passing away, Jean's office issues death certificates. Those have to be done within a certain time frame. So there are some really essential qualities of that office.
Definitely some of it's a 1. And if it's the death certificate thing.
So is it a 1 though, or is it a 2?
Well,
It depends on the different characteristics that you're referring to. I mean, it's vital statistics. I mean, those things have to be done right away. Taking care of money and deposits, that's a huge priority. I don't want money. Yeah, I would say that's a 1. I mean, other things, transfer station permits, those kinds of things, other things could be kind of be more of a
4.
3 or a 4. I mean, but I mean, it's just, it all depends on the different statistical things that I'm doing.
Right. Again, keep in mind, we're planning for worst case scenario. Worst case scenario here, something comes and wipes out, and let's say half or 3/4 of our employees have to be sidelined because they're sick. We've got a small percentage of our employees to get things up and going. Roads, water, transfer station, honestly, to me, seem a 1. Some of this other stuff, it's very important, but it's probably not a 1.
You know, people are not going to be coming in to get transfer station permits or to be paying for permits, probably.
Right.
I mean, if it's that bad, people are going to be hunkered down, I would think.
But there are some aspects of it that I think are
Right.
2.
Yeah, I'd
And some
just
that
leave
are
it at,
way less, yeah.
I would just leave it as a 2.
All right. And obviously we can always go back and make amendments. So just trying to get through some of the
Yeah.
For this though, Doug, I think what I would do is I'd leave vital statistics and banking down there in this description and take off transfer station permits, because then what we're doing is we're putting into the document the reasons why we put those things in there.
Yeah. Okay. And I can, as Caitlin said, there's another section we can.
Yeah, without making an exhaustive list of it.
I'm just making a note for myself here.
Okay.
Okay. My office. So I started kind of playing around with this, and then I was like, wait, there's just so many different things. But again, to the exact thing that we just talked about, making sure everybody's getting paid. That's going to be important. You know, in terms of accounts receivable and payable, those types of things, us being able to pay bills, there's some things associated with that are going to be important. It's probably not a 1. Maybe it's a 2 or a 3. But again, probably, I think making sure our employees are getting paid is probably the most important thing. But what's
I was
everybody?
gonna say, without that, the wheels can fall off all the 1 activities pretty quickly if people are doing it and perceiving they're not gonna get paid.
Right.
But the office also handles a lot of our communications with the public. So
That's a 1,
that, you know,
communication.
All right. So let me do this, and then let me just put communication as a 1. What would you say, bills? Maybe a 2 or a 3 or 4? Nobody likes
Hold on.
bills, but they're necessary.
in the true panic, let's hold off on paying them. Yeah.
I mean, You know, we got to keep the lights on at the highway department.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 4. I feel like you can't keep going on a nice.
3 is fine.
All right.
Now, as we're going through these, Doug, would it be helpful? Some of these things that we're kind of debating about, are they a 1 or a 2, like town clerk's office, town manager's office? Some of these things could be easily done remotely.
Mhm.
Does that make them qualify as a 2 instead of a 1? Because really what we're doing here is kind of planning on phases, right? Of who's allowed in the building, you know, things like highway, water, transfer station. The employees have to be physically present to be able to do that. Code enforcement, the same. Whereas town clerks and town manager, they have to spend some time in the office. You know, Kate has to print checks to pay our vendors, but many of their essential functions translate well to remote work.
But isn't
There's-
this just characterizing the function rather than the actual conduct of that function?
So complete the table below by identifying each essential function with a description, identify priority, provide as much detail as necessary to identify each function, describe, tab, blah, 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 blah. Yes, this is the general, these are the types of things. There is another section for the essential positions and what the justification is for this position. And then there's a whole nother section on remote work protocols and what we should include in that. We'll get into all of that stuff. But
So
this is like just broad overall.
Right.
These are the important type things that need to be done.
So down below you address how they will be handled. Up here it's just relative importance.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Town board meetings. Town board is a 1 in my opinion, because we've got to, regardless if it's a remote or an in-person meeting, if the highway superintendent needs money for something because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're out of salt, we need to be able to meet to authorize the expenditure for the salt, for instance. So I don't know any other way around that. Agreed? Yep. All right.
I agree.
Planning board. So we said that the development office was kind of like a 4. It's still essential. It's still important, but maybe it's not a priority in getting the wheels back up and turning. In a pandemic situation or there's a critical situation. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to list all of these as 4.
They'd all be 4s, yeah.
Planning board, zoning board, environmental conservation board, and board of assessment review for all of them. They're all important, and we'll get them up and going even in an emergency situation. But kind of what we're going to focus on first. That's kind of the point here is what are we going to get up and going? What am I missing? What are the departments? What did we learn this year in terms of the different departments and what it is that we need to make sure that is up and going, especially some of you that are some of the things that you've been hands-on this year through some of this. What are we missing?
I
What
wonder.
about the courts?
Okay.
Do we need to include the courts?
Yep.
The other thing I was thinking is the coordination with the other municipalities, like our townspeople get the water from another place and this, you know what I mean? So we have that kind of coordination. And I feel like maybe it's just another aspect of town manager's office that we could capture, but.
It depends. Like, for instance, Jim has a shared, or not a shared service, but basically there's protocols in place with all the highway. So if something were to happen, but like, for instance, Jim, do you want to touch on what your recent meeting about backup plan for like even snow plowing and those sorts of things?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got to take off. Not to cut Jim off, but I will see you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving if we don't talk before.
You too, Jared.
Enjoy. All right.
Hey, Jared.
Jared.
Bye.
Thanks.
Some of the work we've been doing with, particularly with the city of Canandaigua, as I said before, is we're trying to come up with a snowplow plan that works for both municipalities. If and when there is an issue like this that arises. We also have our intermunicipal agreement with all the municipalities, city, towns, and villages for equipment and shared equipment employees if needed already without even necessarily having to go through any declaration if an event comes up. So those are a couple things that are being done today. The water, obviously, we have been discussing that about shared operators coming into, if for some reason the people we have for operators can't come to work, those others can for us and do our testing and inspecting of our locations. That is something also we've been working on.
So keep in mind, this plan is for health emergencies. I know a lot of times I drift off into, my example I always use is, what are we going to do if a large tornado takes a big, huge swath across the town of Canandaigua, and what's going to be our plan? And a lot of times my mind drifts off into that, but this is specifically health emergency. So we got to keep focused on that health aspect for this plan.
Doug, sorry,
What about fire
I
department?
came back in while you were already started. So you may have already mentioned this, but technology?
Yeah, it's we did touch, it's actually one of the things that they recommended that we include technology as the first one
Never
there.
mind.
Actually, that's okay. Fire department, yes. And I guess the other thing that, or maybe we include as part of this, but Chris, great question. Emergency services for anybody that we contract with needs to be included in this. Anybody, is there anything that we're missing? Any others that we're missing?
Is the emergency services something that we would be responsible to get back up and running?
So there has to be a plan in place for even our contractors. That's spelled out in the law that the legislature passed. So we need to, at some point in time, as we get a little bit further into this document and get this going, this has to be coordinated, obviously, with our 3 current fire service providers, or Cheshire, the city of Canandaigua, and East Bloomfield. And while they're independent entities, they contract with us. So we have to make sure that the plan includes them up and running to provide the services to our residents.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
It's part of that. Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting twist because we're not directly responsible. We pay them for a service, but we need to make sure that service is provided to our residents regardless.
Yeah.
What's just real quickly here, courts. I know this is a difficult task, just trying to help but generally assign numbers. And I put on here 7JD. I'll wordsmith this stuff later, but the 7JD is going to have a big say in what the court, it has all the say in what the court does or doesn't do. And obviously you've seen some of the email communication we've had recently with the courts, and the courts going remote again. We do provide support, I guess is how I would say, to the town court. And at some point we have to provide that support. Again, I don't know that it's a 1, it's not a road or a water, but I could see it definitely being, a 3 maybe. I don't know. Just throw that out there. What's everybody's thoughts?
I would suggest a 3. They went months by just hold back cases until they can reopen again. So that's to be that much of a priority to them.
Yeah, that's fine.
So if something happened to, say, Kristen and the 2 judges, and the 7th JD says, yes, you can hold court again, what's the backup plan? Is that what we're referring to? Is somebody going to step in for Kristen to be the court clerk? So if the 7th JD says, yes, hold court again, isn't that what we have to follow? Wouldn't it be more imperative to do that?
Would it be our decision to make, or is it because the courts have a lot of their own say?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's right. If the 7th JD says open and start scheduling your cases, is that something we have to do, or we say we don't have the staff right now and it's kind of on hold?
Kathy, do you have any thoughts on that? That's an interesting question. I don't know.
So
Because we provide the support.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally, a neighboring clerk or someone from another town will come over when, and I believe that's through OCA. It's not the local town that arranges that. It's so, again, I came in late on this, so I don't know that I'm giving you good information based on what you're looking for, but the judges in conjunction with OCA, 7th Judicial District will come up with a plan for another clerk. Because obviously, you know, a lay person couldn't come in and, you know, fill out all their paperwork for a DWI. So it has to be another clerk generally, if that's the example. So then I'll get it later. I don't want to interrupt you. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't really have much to say about
Numbers?
the operations anyway, so it would be up to the 7th Judicial District to determine how that would be done, I would think.
Yeah, we really couldn't operate the court without OCA's input. Even if they were operated remotely with another clerk from somewhere else, the courts can pretty much operate more. And another clerk could easily enough pick it up because it's the same paperwork for every court, or should be.
Right, maybe in the description for this for court, I need to be a little more specific about the type of support that we provide. We provide the technology support. We provide, obviously, the building space support, those types of things, not the actual court conducting of the court. It's the support that we provide.
Right.
We could list here and then prioritize. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right, so I will do that. Emergency services, I'm just going to make that one a 1. I think we all agree on that, right? We got to make sure that's a coordination. Does that need to be listed separately? Jim, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it should, because coordination to me means almost like our water emergency response plan. What is the response to the issue, and what are the contacts to call and find the materials, the vendors, we call in, those types of things. It's coordination to me. It should be at least a 2, because so we have something spelled out where we find stuff. If I'm not here, Doug's not here, you know, here, go to this binder. Here's what it says to do to find out the information you need.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else missing that we experienced this year, or that maybe we didn't do?
What about communications? Did you list that under town manager?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the other big thing, I certainly wouldn't make it a number 1, but one of the things that I had to do this year, and Sam and I've worked a whole lot on this, is even to open the town hall, we had to fill out all these documents with the state, the same for each of our parks, the same for our the swimming areas. I mean, there was just page after page and document after document that we had to sign attestations to that we were going to do this, that, and the other thing. I don't know what to call that, but something or other like that, so that we at least document that somebody's working on that. That's got to be prioritized there somehow.
Just facilities or some title like that.
Sure, that's a good idea.
Or perhaps even in coordination with larger government agencies, because really we're coordinating with the state in order to be able to operate.
Yeah, wouldn't that all be under coordination instead of, yeah, and then just have different bullets over in the center column?
Yeah, maybe.
That way it's all in one spot.
So then I guess, should this be listed separately, like buildings and grounds type stuff then? Maybe, so this would be all government agency, and then we can list the particulars. But then, you know, obviously buildings and grounds, including the parks, and I can list all the details and everything, but there's some aspect of that that's got to be addressed, whether it's these reports or whatever the case. Okay.
And that could capture like the aspect of cleaning or having it be ready for people to, you know, there's a lot of things we had to do to have the building open and maintain open.
Right. Yep. Are there other categories, or is there anything else? I mean, just from things that we learned. Gene, was there anything else? I'm going to go around to each of the department heads here quickly. I mean, think about the things that we went through this year. Think back to March and April. Gene, I know one of the things you and I talked about is how we sign documents, and we were able to do that electronically. We could probably list that through the technology piece, but I know that that was one of the pieces that you and I were trying to figure out early on, and how we were doing some of that, or even some of the scanning. What are some of the other things that?
It was kind of, I don't know, I'd have to kind of go back and really think and kind of come up with a list.
You know, the other thing that I think back to some of those original conversations, we had to figure out how we were going to handle the mail. And again, maybe that falls under buildings, ground type stuff, or maybe it falls under the town clerk's office. Let me just list it here for right now under town clerk, just so we don't lose it. But that was something we had to figure out, and we're still experimenting with. And then even the same for the phones. Gene, I'm not putting all this responsibility on you. I'm just listing it here so we don't.
That's fine. You're okay. That's all right.
Let's see, signatures. That was something we had to. Okay. Jim.
I mean, are you looking to like under the town clerks, you got vital statistics, which incorporates a lot of things. You got banking that incorporates a lot of things. Do you want us department heads to kind of go through and like just categorize our main things that we do and not list everything here?
Yeah, it would be helpful, and specifically think about the situation this year from a health emergency perspective, not from a, catastrophic perspective, but just the health emergencies, some of the things that we experienced this year. That would be helpful, whether it goes in this section or the next section that Caitlin was talking about. We'll figure that out kind of, but just kind of capture the information. That's kind of what I wanted to get you guys thinking about is, what are some of the things, what are some of the lessons we learned? And Jim, I know that there's been a whole host of things, and I can't even tell you guys how many conversations Terry, Jim, and I had about the transfer station this year, but it was a lot.
That's true.
Ranks right up there with coordination, worried about fuel deliveries, materials, parts repair equipment, keeping staff safe, providing PPE where needed, finding PPE when needed, the scheduling of staff when trying to get work done in the community when half are here and half are off. Those are some of the things that come to my mind.
I think Jim just hit on something, the PPE. Who's going to make sure that we have sufficient PPE for all employees?
So there's a whole section. Yeah, there's a whole section on here on PPE, and we can actually spell out. Now, obviously, we can make this document. It's our document. It's our policy. So we'll put in there whatever we want it to be. But maybe we start right out into the PPE section. Jim Fletcher is personally responsible to make sure that everyone. But
that should be something listed above.
We can list it.
Would that be under like buildings and grounds?
Essential function. Yeah, let me just list it for right now. We can always go back and wordsmith this, obviously. So I'll just list it PPE for here.
Just so everybody's aware, I did reorganize all of our PPE, take inventory, label it all. So I knew that that was a section in here, but I kind of got a head start. So all the PPE is located in the women's locker room in the highway facility. In the lockers, there's magnets on the outside and it says what's in them. We're pretty well stocked right now on masks, hand sanitizer, disinfectant, extra containers to put disinfectant and hand sanitizer in, those kinds of things, cleaning supplies.
All right. If you guys think of other things, feel free to shoot me an email. Again, I know this is painful. This is like watching paint dry. When we originally started this committee, honestly, I'm happy to have the 5 town board members, but I wasn't expecting you guys, but it's cool that you're participating and providing input and everything. A lot of this from an operational perspective is, I think, lessons learned that we learned this year as department heads and kind of the things that we had to figure out and then document it and kind of spell that out in this plan to make sure that we don't miss anything. And then things that we didn't think of. The one that I'm very concerned about and trying to figure out, and Chris touched on it there, is the fire department. And we've got to make sure, since we're now responsible to include that in our plan, I'm a little bit concerned about that. I can tell you that communication with our fire chiefs is like communicating A to Z. And it depends on who the chief is and what kind of communication they're used to. And I'll tell you, like, for instance, and it was a classic reminder last night, we had this fire at Quail Summit. I immediately get notified, the city of Canandaigua fire chief is notifying me that, and this is not to knock anyone or anything, I'm just sharing with you what happened. City of fire chief immediately notifies me the city's going in support of Cheshire. Cheshire's the main respondent. The fire chief, I've had Cheshire fire chiefs in the past that would text me for everything and anything. And then I have some fire chiefs that don't communicate with me as much. The fire chief is, I'm trying to find out kind of what's going on, but the fire chief is also very, very busy, completely understandable. But meanwhile, they're calling for code enforcement. I've got a code enforcement officer that's off. I've got a code enforcement officer that's not available. And I'm the next person on the list. So they're hitting me. And meanwhile, I'm still waiting for a response from the fire chief. So communication with fire departments is a concern that, I'm hoping that we can figure out some streamlined way to communicate with the fire departments through this process. There are apps called I Am Responding that Cheshire, I believe, is using. Are they still using that, Jim? I know
I don't know if they are or not. I do not use it with them. I just get the notifications.
Yeah.
They are using it. They are using it.
I used to get it, but then it stopped working. I didn't know if it was me or if it was them or whatever the case. But anyway, so a whole variety of different things that we'll have to figure out on how we communicate with our fire departments. So it's been an hour. The essential positions, just to touch on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and list all the essential positions that you guys just declared as essential positions at the last meeting. And then we'll start to go through some of the responsibilities. That'll make that pretty easy. And then for the next meeting, we've got to start talking about remote work, staggered shifts, and work protocols. So that was all I wanted to get through today. And I know it's boring, you guys. I know. I'm sorry, it's not the most exciting topics, but it is important to go ahead and document it so that when this happens again, if it happens again in the future, that we've got stuff there. So.
Yeah.
I just have two quick things. I know I missed the first part of the meeting because I was having trouble connecting. You guys talked about chief executive and hierarchy and who would be in line, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. And the other thing that I suggest inserting is in that first concept of operations is that somehow we put in there that all communication, all records of information communication shall be kept in accordance with the new LGS1 retention schedule. Is that?
Yeah, we can, Jean, just shoot me an email with that and we'll put it
Okay.
right in the.
Okay. All right.
Yep. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, concerns, suggestions? All right.
No,
Well, it's not really like watching paint dry, Doug, for somebody that is under lock and key here at his house, so.
that's your excitement for the
It's
day.
excitement for me, Linda, it really is. Oh,
Well, and Doug, stop apologizing. We have to do this as a town and we're all here for you.
I know. It's
This is my
so-
last day in stir though. So. Then I can go back to what I was normally doing, which is essentially what I'm doing in lockdown. So
Right.
no real difference.
Doug, I've seen paint dry,
Mm.
Yeah.
a lot better than that.
Oh, great, thanks. That's wonderful.
Well, at least with paint, you can keep going over and touch it. You see if it is dry, you know?
All right then.
All right, well, thank
Okay.
you, everyone.
Okay.
Probably it's gonna be the last time I see you guys before Thanksgiving, so have
Happy
a great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right,
Give
everybody, be
everyone a
safe.
happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.